and welcome to Curated Conversations, a podcast by the Grand Rapids African American Health Institute, where we talk all things health and wellness. My name is Ashley, and I'll be your host for today's conversation. This episode, we will be talking about the power of rest, battling burnout in the Black communities. We have Syreeta Drake, who is a board-certified psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner and dedicated nursing educator with over 20 years of experience across diverse healthcare settings, from critical care and case management to psychiatric nursing and palliative care. Syreeta's career reflects a deep commitment to both clinical excellence and compassionate service. She's also a passionate advocate for mental health, faith-based care, and nursing education, and currently serves as on the board of GRI, Gilda's Club, and the Grand Rapids chapter of the National Black Nurses Association. Join us as we explore her journey, insights, and mission to bring healing hope to the communities she serves. Syreeta, I am so excited today to have you on the podcast. How are you?
I am doing well.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm so glad. I can't think of anyone else who would be more qualified to have this conversation with us, especially considering this Men's Mental Health Month,
Yes.
All things mental health. So, yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm excited to have this conversation because it is so necessary.
Yes. Let's get right into it. So, talking about burnout. What is it? Let's just get a little bit of context around what burnout is, defining it, and what are some of the causes, like systematic racism, economic inequalities, like cultural expectations. I know that's a mouthful, but let's just talk about it.
Yeah, so thank you. That is actually a great place to start because not only is burnout multifaceted, as in there's many parts to it or many different presentations of it, but then it's also multi-layered. So there's different levels to it. So burnout happens because of all the things that you mentioned. We have all these different roles and we don't really get a day off from any of them, right? So when we talk about maybe racism in particular, we don't ever have the opportunity to live outside of our skin. So we never know how that's going to show up, like how the world is going to respond to us when we do show up. So that's constant navigation all the time. So when we talk about how that presents, particularly in the Black community, it's this soul weariness, right? You just tired, and you can't point to one particular thing. And usually those people who have burnout is because they often shine very brightly. So I do want to start with that. Like you give of yourself, your gifts, your talents, you're pouring into others. And whether you work outside the home or not, it doesn't, you could show up in your home, out in the community, at your job, wherever that may be, but you show up with your whole self and you like to be wholly present. So usually you first start noticing that you here, but you're not here, right? Like, yeah, I'm gonna make it through. I'm gonna do it, right? I'm gonna do because you have some acumen. You've developed some tenure in some areas, and so you know what to do. You know how to make it through a day. And that soul weariness, when it goes unnamed, is largely due because we've been taught to endure instead of express. Mm-hmm. Or you can express it, but you still got to get it done.
Yeah.
So then you start saying, well, what's the point in even expressing it when I still got to do it? Okay. And traditionally, though, I have a traditional definition here that I would like to read, that it is emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion caused by prolonged stress. So for the Black community, burnout for us is usually compounded by the generational trauma, the systemic racism, and the emotional tax of navigating spaces that weren't necessarily designed for us, but will tolerate us. And then also, we can't talk about that without expressing that quiet fatigue of the constant code switching, of being the only one, or carrying a community while you also have to prove your own worth.
Yeah, I like that. Prior to me knowing what burnout was, it just seemed like tired and exhausted just did not justify or really grasp what it was that I was feeling. It is literally like the going beyond that, and the fact that you say, I've never heard it described, that it is also attached to prolonged stress. So that is super important that we realize that when we are in stressful situations, we are also running the risk of eventually burning out. So now that we have the definition, a little bit of idea of what burnout is, give us some of the signs of what burnout looks like, like how does it present itself? Because I know that it can present itself in many different ways. We can become masters at disguising it, but it still somehow shows up. So what are some ways?
Yeah. So unfortunately, I believe that, the community, so we talk about the Black community as like a separate thing, but then just the community at large or living in America is not very welcoming, right? We live in a very keep it moving, what's the next? Okay, I know you've been sad, but that happened like yesterday.
Right.
This is today. Get up.
Move on.
Yes, seize the day. So you have all of that you have to kind of navigate, because if you're not moving at the world's pace too, then that presents its own set of circumstances that you didn't have to navigate or feel like you have to explain. So I wanted to make sure that I gave this the level of attention and importance, and I didn't want to forget anything. So I wrote some things down of how it can look, because it does present as what you would call a different kind of tired, because often too, just mere sleep doesn't help it. Okay, because then your mind doesn't turn off. So then burnout can look like irritability. And usually you get irritated about stuff that doesn't usually bother you. Like, oh my goodness, why did they turn the knob to the left instead of the right? We always turn it and you're like, okay, right? And it's just these things. And you first start noticing because of the responses of other people about how you start showing up in spaces like, okay, what's going on with Syreeta? Did you realize that she, or like for me, I know sometimes people like, she doesn't have her flowers in her hair. Wait a
That's
second.
a sure sign. What's going on?
I know she normally keeps spares in the car and in her bag. Like we don't know what we getting ready to get, right? So, but it can be irritability or a numbness where you feel like you almost, in order to manage your own energy, that you kind of have to numb yourself because of just different stimuli. You're going to be in a situation that might present a lot of stimulus. And so you kind of numb yourself. And then forgetfulness. Like I literally forgot how to spell my name one day. And this is not an exaggeration. I was sitting there and I had it and I said, wait a minute. I said, oh, this is not good. Because I'm like, these things, I'm like, and that's one of the first things you learn how to spell, right? So it's been with you the longest. That's your identity. And then there's that fatigue we talked about that sleep can't fix. And then also a sense of emotional detachment. And I want to call out the distinction between numbness and emotional detachment, because emotions, you think about whether it's fear, anxiety, all that type of stuff, is a emotional detachment where those things might be present, but you don't allow any type of investigation or you don't allow them to present themselves. So you know that it's there and you might feel a little anxiety or whatever it is, but you're like, not right now. So you kind of just stuff it down, as opposed to the numbness is you don't allow it to even penetrate. And so a lot of times though, what makes it difficult is that they both can present themselves at the same time. So if you numb yourself and you're also emotionally detached, when you try to go back and maybe pick those things up, or if you don't, it can manifest in our bodies in other ways, and like physical illness and things too. So that's some of the signs. And then how it can show up is it can sound like, I'm fine. Because we don't really have time a lot of times, right, to get into the dissertation of how I feel. Then you start questioning people's motives. They don't really want to know if I'm okay. They expect. So you start answering according to the level of other people's expectation instead of just living in your authenticity. Instead of just saying, I'm kind of struggling today or whatever it might be, you're like, oh, I'm fine. Just because you're like, I don't know, and I don't know where this can go, or I need to be fine. And then we treat rest as a luxury. Instead of a necessity.
Right.
And then you have all those different roles. Like if you're a caretaker, right? If you have children, elders, because we believe in, caring for our elders and everything and each other. So you have those different roles. And then even the community. So you can't even imagine stepping away.
this is kind of the first time that I've kind of associated burnout. It just feels like you're on autopilot. What you talking about, just the numbness and not being able to feel, and you really are just going through the motions and just really trying to get through the day because you're just so exhausted. And I imagine myself that when I get to that point, it is a button that you just push and you just coast, you know. And so with that, I imagine that it does have some kind of effect on your mental health. So with it, June being Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, we want to bring some type of awareness to that. Like, how does burnout, you know, tie into mental health, being a mental health issue?
Yeah, so because your mind processes every single thing. Like, even your emotions come from the limbic system. So I have my little brain here. I carry the brain with me everywhere.
I love it.
like the show, because you see how it's so intricate. Like, there's so many pieces and parts to it. But your emotions, you know, the heart gets credit for so many different things, right? But your emotions really live in the mind.
Yeah.
Okay. And so not only do you have the emotional realm, but then you have like your neurotransmitters and things. And so then you have the pressures of society, and then there's like the gender roles and all of that stuff that is all processed by the mind, but how it's going to manifest in you is in your behavior. So we always will talk about how love is an action word. And so then if you're a man and you talk about like historically what has been the societal norm where maybe the man would provide, and then you have pride, right? You have that. And then if we talk about the Black community, then there's Black pride, which is a whole new level of things in addition to Black girl magic, right? So if we talk about the female, right, there's this whole, just this it factor you're just supposed to have all the time and show up. So if you think about all those things, especially with the mental health, this being Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, these things, when we hold them in, because a lot of times men aren't expressing, they don't have that space.
Yeah.
Or has it been really portrayed? Go ahead and let your feelings out. Don't hold them in. They can only really express their feelings around the holidays, right? Well, it's Valentine's Day, so let this person know you love them, or it's the family reunion. No. But every day there should be an accounting or a check-in, even with just yourself, for how you're feeling. And this is so important because it manifests as hypertension, right? Like it manifests, it can be some very like chronic diseases and headaches, you know. So all of these things where we talked about the numbness, the fatigue, they will feel it too. But again, it's not been widely accepted that they could just say, you know, I'm just tired, or I need to detach for a minute, or I kind of need to step away, or I'm feeling this. You know, rarely will we hear them say those things, and they still have them because we all have a brain, and our brains are designed the same, right? Like, so in the limbic system, that's why I point that out. That is in the brain. That's your emotions and everything. So we all have that, and then those pressures, and they're outlets for how to relieve that pressure. Like, what do they have? So sometimes we often see with men, and not to overgeneralize, but we have seen there is something called somnolent detachment, where, and I hear sometimes in therapy, you know, women will complain about this a lot. That everything is going on, and he's just asleep. Because you can get there's so much, think the brain like a circuit, they detach and just go to sleep because it's all the stimuli, right? But still, whether you're sleeping, and it's not necessarily a productive sleep or anything else, but it's like the being able to process, it's still the overwhelm. So that can present, as we talk about like emotions and stuff, you know, as a depression. And so people can either sleep too much or not enough, right? So it's not that this sleep is like a productive even type of sleep, but it is just this detachment. Okay, you know, and they will like sleep. So yeah, I think it's very timely to have this conversation so that we could provide, you know, some resources in those spaces where they are, because I know that, you know, Gry in particular has something where men can talk like at the barbershop. I mean, that is so brilliant, right? To go into spaces, you know, where they are, where they already feel safe, where there's already a camaraderie, and say, hey, what you been thinking about?
Exactly.
You know, so providing more of those opportunities, I think, is just going to be life-changing, because it starts to normalize, and then you change the narrative. Who says you can only go to the barbershop and get a haircut?
Exactly. All right. Let's talk about hustle culture. They're in the Black community, being overworked and getting it out the mud and all that has somehow become glorified. I can remember even like my parents and my grandparents and elders just always talking about, well, that's the problem, you know, that you don't want to work, or when back in my day you had to, and it somehow becomes a badge of honor. Can we talk about the hustle culture and like overworking and how we somehow interpret that as empowering and how that relates to burnout as well?
Yes. Whew, that is very, very, very loaded. So yes, the hustle culture. So in every culture, there is like this unspoken set of rules. And I mean like rules of engagement. So one thing that is very much entrenched in the hustle culture is when it comes to rest, I'll rest when I'm dead.
Yep.
Really? So that's the only time that you can get rest?
It sounds crazy when you say that.
But you know, we've heard it, right? Yeah, oh yeah, I sleep
That's
when
the
I'm
plan.
dead, or I'll, like it's like we're not supposed to get sleep. Like physiologically, there is a time, like the whole body is set up as the sun starts to go down. You usually starts to get a little bit more tired. Like
Yeah.
it's all, your whole body is designed to get a certain number of hours of rest. And so in the hustle culture, and I think now there's there's a lot of things that feed into that, because oftentimes in the Black community, we can be overworked and underpaid. So I think initially, I don't think all these things start out the way that they end up. And then what I mean by that is I don't think in the beginning, you know, the idea was for us to lead to a place of burnout and, you know, just perpetuate not resting and all of that. But a lot of it was a means of survival.
Yeah.
And so when you start out in survival mode, but then you're unable to make the transition, then that's where these things become a problem. And that's what I really see with the hustle culture. Now, when you talk in like mainstream society and community, and they talk about having different streams of income. So the thing is that when there's a culture, the culture really seeks to protect itself. And so hustle culture will take all those different things. When you talk about the different streams of income, yep, that's right. That's why I hustle. I grind and I get this and I got to have this and I got to have that. And, you know, and it was hard and I got to get it out the mud. So we talk about getting it out the mud. What is that? Getting it out the mud, that it's been very, very, very difficult. I've had no help. And because I've had no help and I don't have help, I can't sleep because, you know, time is money. And the more that I spend my time in these other things, so you have all these things and you link all these things together. All these behaviors and manifestations that we don't talk about the other side of that whatever you allocate your time to, because we only have the 24 hours, all of us, no matter how hard we hustle. Right? You only have those 24 hours that's time not given to something else that could be beneficial to you. And a lot of times what we're going to sacrifice is sleep. And then we sacrifice sleep and then we sacrifice relationships. So also in our culture, because we interpret burnout as being depleted, but also showing up when we feel depleted, we achieve this excellence under pressure because we're still able to perform. And that's what society rewards, the ability to perform and the ability to just, oh, I know this thing just happened 5 minutes ago, but here you are. You was able to show up and, oh, you don't even look like what you've been through. Oh, my goodness. And so all of that feels good.
Yeah.
And so we have these feel good neurotransmitters in our brain, okay, that deal, you know, serotonin, but dopamine. You know, dopamine really can be likened to the body's natural cocaine. Like if that reward center of the brain, so the way you were able to make something out of nothing. Yeah. But that doesn't need to be a mantra or a legacy. So I think the piece that is often missing, only because we sometimes don't know how to make that shift or that pivot, because you're actively making it happen while you have people dependent on you. So then how do I do legacy building? So that means if I have someone coming behind me and I got it out of the mud, do they need to really be out there making mud pies in this area where I've attained wisdom and knowledge? Or could we have a conversation?
Yeah.
And I know that they're going to have dreams and ideals and they might have to work a little bit harder in some areas. But if you can get the benefit of my wisdom and my connection and we can collaborate and I can show you how to navigate things in a different way and get rest.
Yeah.
So I think that's often left out of the conversation. And so that whole hustle culture is going to have not only rules of engagement, but it's going to have a playlist. Every day I'm hustling, right? You grind and you just, I mean, you know you're going to throw on that playlist.
That validates me.
It makes you feel good about these things that you're doing. Yeah, and how you don't need rest and how, or you miss out on some key things. You show up as only a piece of yourself. So are you fully present in those times? And so people say, oh yeah, you remember? No, I really don't remember. Like, what was that like? Because you were just there going through the motions instead of being actively engaged with the different pieces of yourself and the parts of your life. When we talk about that hustle culture, there's also usually some root causes. And so, but they can be masked. So there's like economic disparities. And then we have, again, those cultural expectations that we got to keep it together in spite of whatever. Spiritual bypassing. And so those people that are spiritual, we can even use that to say, well, if a man don't work, he don't eat. Right? Like, you take all these things.
Like, wait a minute.
And we forget that whole, depending on what, your faith is. But, we talk about Big G in the Bible. We even forget that there was a day that he rested. A whole day. Right? So we leave that part out. We're going to pull out all those other ones and make it work. Right? Then there's this underlying myth, which is really a carryover from all the things that happened subsequent to slavery here. Is that when you rest, or that black people are lazy. So I can't, if I'm working 7, 11 million, 12 jobs, I can't possibly be lazy. Like, where does this even come from? Or this certain presentation that I have to constantly always be busy and always be doing. But there comes a point in time where you do so much that not all of that is productive time. Right. And these things start to become unfruitful. So I know I said a lot.
You didn't. We didn't say enough. Because I was thinking before you said it that how that the burnout and the hustle culture correlates to lazy. And I think that to bring it on a more personal level is that one thing you will not call me is lazy.
Right.
And to prove that or show that I'm always working, and never, we discussed off camera is that's one thing about me is that I'm always thinking about the future and I have the future in mind. But in doing so, you miss the present and you rest in the present. So you deprive yourself of just it really hit hard when you say like your body needs rest. It's a necessity. It's not a luxury. And that's how we look at it. That's how we view it, is that it is something that, because I worked so hard that now I deserve to rest. I deserve to do nothing. And it's like, no, how about that's just what you need? And that's okay. And I think that we interpret that the rest as a weakness. And even as a people, after everything that we've endured, and we don't want to be called weak and we don't want to be perceived as lazy. So we end up in this vicious cycle of trying to prove ourselves when we really don't have anything to prove, because it's in the history.
Absolutely. I like the fact that you brought that up. And if I could just say another thing about the rest piece, there's a difference between, the resting, because your body is going to get what it needs one way or another.
So you sit you down.
Either, we sat down somewhere, like I told you, right? So there's gonna come a time, and we hear about it, right? Sometimes in the news and stuff, sometimes people driving and they fall asleep and they do they'll just say, oh, they just so exhausted, or so that exhaustion, the body has a program for survival at all times. And so when exhaustion kicks in, this rest can be highly inconvenient for you whenever it shows up. So when we talk about the rest, just like you need to eat every day, stay hydrated, your body, and everybody's going to require a different amount. But 8 to 10 hours of rest, some people can do 6 to 8, but getting that in, because what I need everyone to understand as well is that there's certain processes. Your body is it heals itself, during that time.
Rest.
Yep. Rest is actually very restorative. Like, it gives you things that you can't do during active, time. And so sometimes people try to rest and they find that they can't, because then they'll say once they lay still, then their mind. Well, your mind was going, this is how you were doing. But so that's where you start. Like, if you're looking for, am I headed in a way that I'm completely unbalanced, where my body might have to just sit me down, is if you lay down, or you just, close your eyes and just sit. And this is without stimuli. I really need to point this out. We're not talking about rest where you're grabbing your devices and you're scrolling and you're checking emails or you're passively listening. I'm just saying sitting with no stimulation and just resting, because what you have to understand about your brain is that its job is to process all stimuli. So whether you're listening to something, there's a process, and the body always stays on code. Okay, so it's always going to do so. If you're having a hard time, you might have to completely disengage from any type of stimulation. And I always tell people that you want to set yourself up for success at all times. And if you need to rest and your mind is going, you don't want to give it anything else to go off of.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and that could even be if you want to lay down with a book, because a book requires a different way that you interact, like with the page. It's like a physical book. I'm not talking about an ebook, but just because it requires your eyes and your mind to pay attention in a different way, as opposed to scrolling can be a bit more passive and you don't know what's going to pop up. People will find all the time that there's like, I went to read that book and it was reading me, like, because you have to focus to see what, as opposed to somebody saying something, or you're just watching content. Like, that's a bit more, you have to actually, like, what did they just say? Oh my goodness. Or I don't know what that word means. Like, it's a different level. I would say if you can't just go like cold turkey with no stimuli, like maybe start with something like that. And that has been helpful for people. But yeah, if you get into a sleep debt because you're not sleeping enough, people say, oh, I'll make it up, or, or this will mess this up. But you really, once that time is gone, it's gone. So it's going to be very important that we honor those different moments.
Yeah.
And rest is a high priority.
Right. So how do we reclaim this? Like, okay, so we know we're tired. We know we're burnt out. We know we need rest, but how do we reclaim it? Like, and I think reclaim is such an important word because it is mine. We deserve, like, we need it, so how do we reclaim it both individually and as a people?
Yeah. So I think first, individually is recognizing that it's your right. And you don't really owe an explanation for that. And what I find with that, when we talk about this hustle culture and how the glorification of overwork and everything, I think that's another thing that sometimes it starts with boundaries, right? And we're not very good at setting those. Yeah. Okay. Because a lot of us could be like first generation, we're pioneering some things. And so we feel all of this pressure all the time. And in order to give well, you need to rest well. And so we will clump everything under resilience. And resilience is beautiful because it brought us to this point. I think the ancestors, they definitely were very resilient. They tolerated a lot. There was a lot. And so if we are the fruit of their labor, should we not have a more excellent presentation in some areas? And so I think these words like resilience and all of that, there's always another side of it, to whereas it's a very beautiful thing. Resilience can also be viewed as a trauma response because you think you always got to be resilient. Yep. And then you'll clump all that overwork and everything under, well, I'm resilient. I'll be all right because I always am. And okay, but there's a difference between life and what we call quality of life. So I think, to go back to your initial question, is how do you reclaim, is just to know that just very intrinsically basic physiology, there's waking hours and there's sleeping hours, right? Like, if you just go back to physiology, and if somebody's asking you to do something and you don't, and your day is already scheduled and you don't have any more time, because there's a difference between having the time and taking the time. I need you to think about it that way, because people say, oh, I'll make time for this and make time that. But really, if we shift it to that you're taking time from somewhere else, and really, if you make that rest piece a non-negotiable, you just say, oh, I really don't have space right now for that. Yeah. Oh, that sounds like a really good thing. I would love to be a part of it. I just can't do it now. And being okay with it, instead of, a lot of times people come to you because you are always trying to make it work, and you will fit it in. It's amazing. Just like you could be resilient, other people are resilient as well. When you say no, you find they move on to the next person. Right. Right? Like, even like, huh? Right? Where you think it just had to be you all the time. It doesn't always have to be you. But if you want it to continue to be you, you got to get your rest so that the full you can show up.
Yeah, and the power in that no. It's interesting when you talk about setting boundaries. It's interesting that we are afraid to tell other people no, but we won't tell ourselves no. Like, when we need to rest, but we'll tell our no, like, and try to meet other people's needs. So I think that understanding and establishing, first of all, establishing those boundaries that we need to put in place to get our rest that we deserve, and not letting that define it, not letting anyone else define that for us.
Right. And I think sometimes, and so as we do that individually, then that can only spill out to the collective, right? Because, and we just start normalizing. So I think like having conversations like these where you say, oh, wait a minute, there's a such thing as overwork. And I know for myself, I have this personal mantra where I say I like to do all things in the spirit of excellence, right? But, wow, but I don't rest excellently. I'm like, I say all things in excellence, but I'm like, wait a minute, that's
Accept
not
that.
really, I had to clock my own tea, as the young people would say. I had to clock that real quick. I said, wait a minute, what am I doing? I don't, and I do, and because I love people so much, a lot of times there's a part of loving people because there's been a lot of sacrifice, that I thought that was the only presentation of true love was how much you were willing to sacrifice, but that is so unbalanced. Right? That really is unbalanced. There's a part of love that is actually supportive, right, and reciprocal, a part that says, oh, you know what, I think that is so great, and I would do anything in the world for you, but I only have this amount of time allocated to these things. Look me up next time.
I got you next time.
And then where is the self-love or the expression of that self-love? The only time, we don't want to get so used to only being able to express self-care at the point of exhaustion, because then that is not care. Now it's an intervention. Okay. It's kind of like going to the doctor for all your checkups, and then you show up 1 year and they say, oh, your blood pressure is high. And then now they want to put you on medication. One of the first things people usually do is say, what do I have to do to not be on medication?
Right.
But there were signs all along the way before that maybe, pull back on the salt, monitor your weight, do your exercise. But now these are things that you want to try. But they're saying, oh, no, maybe you still should do those things, right? Because there's lifestyle changes, but you also need to take this medication.
Right.
And then we don't want to start there. So if we don't like to start it at the realm of where we might have to do an intervention or be made or forced to do something, because that makes us feel very boxed in, then why are we not prioritizing ourselves? And that self-care is just absolutely mandatory, and rest is a part of that. It is as important as your hydration, as you eating your meals, as exercise. You have to get your rest, because all of this stuff that your body goes throughout the day, when does it get its time to just focus and do what it needs to do for you, so that you continue to show up as the upper echelon of the community? Right? Like, you want to show up as the upper crust of excellence? Yes. And your body said, I'm here for it. But let me get my 6, 7, 8 hours or 10 hours if you need it. Let me get mine. Daily. And if you cheat me on the day, I'm gonna need that back in the nap. I'm gonna need I'm gonna need a little tax. I need a return on all this investing that you're doing out in the world, and everybody, where's my stuff?
Exactly.
And then just, and it can be very fun. And then you just create the way you prepare for other things, for meetings and everything, you prepare to have rest. Set out your bed clothes, say, oh, I'm gonna get in my tub if you like the baths, whatever. They even have shower steamers if like showers are your thing. You put your shower steamers in there, just make it a whole thing of just your time.
So where we can get back to enjoying it.
Enjoying it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Syreeta. I feel like this conversation can go on and on. It's so necessary. It's such a loaded topic. So I want to thank you again so much for stopping by. Also want to give you an opportunity. What you got going on? Anything you want to plug?
Oh, yes. There's so much. Right? I'm here, there, everywhere, right? But so right now we just started, a colleague of mine and myself, we're doing a grief support group. Okay, there's been a lot of grief, loss out in the community. And if you are dealing with that, or you have any unresolved or complicated grief, come to the support groups. They are every Monday, and I'm sure there'll be links available, but they're from 6 to 7:30. We're doing a lot of the mental and emotional heavy lifting, but it's a very safe space. So I would say that that is going on right now as far as like mental health supports. And then I know that Grahai, because it's also in collaboration with Grahai, has like the barbershop and stuff.
This
and
Friday, Saturday.
Yeah, to see, so all of those things, there's things around out in the community. And I would say start with finding a person that you can just be around. Yeah. You don't have to produce. There's a difference between being and producing. A person that you could just be around. And then you will also find some rest and restoration in that. And just, reach out. We are here and available to help support you in whatever way that we can. And there's things going on a lot. I know there's also the Life series being put on. And so we'll make sure that there's links available for that, because that also not only covers some mental health, because there's another thing that I do. It's called Coffee and Conversations. With me and a colleague of mine are doing that as well. But that's going to be on a Saturday. We do those once a month. And then there's also some financial literacy opportunities, and then also some education. The Grand Rapids Black Nurses Association, we also do some education, whether it's about diabetes, and so that is focused more on your physical health, but that Life series covers all areas. And so I'll make sure that those are available, links and things are available, because that's going on. We have something every month, different things.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we'll definitely make sure that we get all that information to get it linked. Thank you so much again for stopping by and chatting with us. And we want to thank you all for joining us for another episode of Curated Conversations. We'll talk to you soon.